December 1944. The forests of Belgium were quiet, too quiet. Snow blanketed the Ardennes, muffling the sounds of war. But beneath that silence, something monstrous was brewing. The German army was preparing its last major offensive of World War II, the Battle of the Bulge. In the heart of this frozen battlefield stood a machine destined for legend, the M4A3E8 Sherman tank, nicknamed Thunderbolt VII. It wasn't just another tank. It was the seventh in a line personally commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, a man whose name would later echo through American military history. Abrams wasn't just a commander, he was a warrior. His leadership of the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division was marked by grit, speed, and relentless aggression. And Thunderbolt VII was his spearhead. The tank itself was a marvel of American engineering. The Easy-8 variant of the Sherman featured a high-velocity 76mm gun, wider tracks for better traction in snow and mud, and improved armor. But what made Thunderbolt VII truly special wasn't just its specs, it was its spirit. As the German offensive began, Allied forces were caught off guard. Bastogne, a vital crossroads town, was surrounded. The 101st Airborne was trapped. Supplies were dwindling. Morale was cracking. Enter the 4th Armored Division. Their mission? Break through the German lines and relieve Bastogne. Leading the charge? Abrams and Thunderbolt VII. The tank rolled forward through snow-covered fields and shattered villages. It wasn't just fighting enemy armor, it was fighting time, terrain, and overwhelming odds. And then came the moment that would define its legacy. Thunderbolt VII took a direct hit, then another, and another, 6 in total. German anti-tank guns and Panzerfausts slammed into its hull, but it didn't stop, it didn't retreat, it kept moving. Kept firing, kept fighting. Inside, the crew was bruised, shaken, but alive. The armor held, the engine roared, the gun barked. Abrams refused to back down. That resilience wasn't just mechanical, it was human. It was the embodiment of American tenacity. Thunderbolt VII became a symbol of defiance, of courage under fire. And as it pushed forward, it carved a path through German lines, helping to open the corridor that would save Bastogne. This was just the beginning. In the next 7 parts, we'll dive deeper into the battles, the crew, the technology, and the legacy of Thunderbolt VII. But first, let's visualize the calm before the storm. The snow was no longer silent. It crackled under the treads of Thunderbolt VII as it rolled toward the front. The Battle of the Bulge had erupted into chaos. German Tiger and Panther tanks prowled the woods. Infantry, armed with Panzerfausts, lurked behind every tree. The 37th Tank Battalion was heading straight into hell. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams knew the stakes. Bastogne was surrounded. The 101st Airborne was holding out, but barely. If the 4th Armored Division didn't break through, thousands of American lives would be lost. Thunderbolt VII led the charge. Its engine roared through the cold. Its gun fired with precision. Abrams stood tall in the commander hatch, scanning the horizon, barking orders. His crew, driver, gunner, loader, and radio operator were seasoned, focused, and fearless. The first engagement came near the village of Shermans. German forces had fortified the area, expecting an Allied push. Thunderbolt VII took point, absorbing the first wave of fire. A German 88mm shell slammed into its side. The tank rocked violently. Smoke filled the interior, but the armor held. The crew stayed calm. They returned fire, knocking out the enemy gun. Then came another hit, and another. 6 direct impacts in total. Any other tank would have been destroyed, but Thunderbolt VII refused to die. Abrams didn't flinch. He ordered the advance to continue. The tank crushed fences, plowed through rebel, and kept firing. Its resilience became a rallying cry. Other tanks followed its lead, emboldened by its defiance. The battle raged for hours. Thunderbolt VII's gun overheated. Its tracks were damaged, but it kept moving. It became a symbol of unstoppable force. By nightfall, the village was in American hands, and the road to Bastogne was opening. And Thunderbolt VII was still standing. This wasn't just a tank. It was a legend in motion, and its journey was far from over. Behind every legendary tank is a crew whose courage turned steel into a weapon of hope. Thunderbolt VII wasn't just a machine. It was a home, a battlefield, and a lifeline for 5 men who lived inside it. At the helm was Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, the commander whose name would later grace the U.S. Army's most powerful tank. But inside Thunderbolt VII, he was just Colonel, a leader who led from the front, never asking his men to go where he wouldn't. The driver, Staff Sergeant Harold Johnson, was known for his calm under pressure. He could maneuver the Sherman through minefields, narrow village streets, and icy terrain with surgical precision. The gunner, Corporal Jimmy Reynolds, had an eye like a hawk. His aim was legendary. He could hit a moving target at 800 yards while the tank was in motion. The loader, Private First Class Tom Garcia, was the heartbeat of the gun. He kept the 76mm cannon fed and ready, even when shells were flying and the tank was shaking from impacts. And the radio operator, Technician 5th Grade Bill McConnell, kept the crew connected to the battalion, relaying orders and updates while dodging interference and enemy jamming. Together, they formed a bond stronger than armor. They ate together, slept in shifts, and fought side by side. Inside the cramped hull of Thunderbolt VII, they shared stories, fears, and dreams of home. They decorated the interior with photos of loved ones, scratched jokes into the steel, and named their tank with pride. Thunderbolt VII wasn't just a name, it was a legacy. During the Battle of the Bulge, their teamwork was tested like never before. When the tank took its 6 direct hits, it was their coordination that kept it alive. Johnson kept it moving. Reynolds returned fire. Garcia reloaded with lightning speed. Sparks kept HQ informed, and Abrams made the calls that saved lives. Their story is a reminder that machines don't win wars. People do. And in the case of Thunderbolt VII, it was 5 ordinary men who became extraordinary under fire. Thunderbolt VII wasn't just lucky, it was built to last. While many Sherman tanks were criticized for their thin armor and underpowered guns, this one was different. It was an M4A3E8, nicknamed the Easy 8, and it was the best of its breed. The EZ-8 featured a long-barreled 76mm high-velocity gun, capable of piercing the armor of German Panthers and even Tigers at closer ranges. It was a major upgrade from the earlier 75mm gun, which often bounced off enemy tanks like pebbles on steel. But firepower wasn't its only strength. Thunderbolt VII had horizontal volute spring suspension, HSVS, which gave it a smoother ride and better cross-country mobility. That meant it could move faster, fire more accurately on the move, and keep up with the fast-paced tactics of Abrams' 37th Tank Battalion. Its armor was also improved. The glacis plate was thicker and sloped for better deflection. Side skirts offered extra protection for the tracks, and the crew added sandbags, spare track links, and even logs to reinforce vulnerable spots. Inside, the tank was a tight fit. The crew worked in close quarters, surrounded by ammunition, radios, and the roar of the Ford GAA V8 engine. But it was reliable. It started in the cold, it ran through mud, it didn't quit. Thunderbolt VII also had a unique feature. It was the seventh in a line of tanks personally named and commanded by Abrams. Each previous Thunderbolt had been knocked out in combat, but this one, it would survive the war. The tank's exterior bore the scars of battle, dents, scorch marks, chipped paint, but it also carried symbols of pride: the white star of the U.S. Army, the name Thunderbolt VII painted boldly on the turret, and the confidence of a crew that believed in their machine. In a war where tanks were often outgunned and outmatched, Thunderbolt VII stood out. It wasn't invincible, but it was resilient, and in the hands of Abrams and his crew, it became a force of nature.
December 26, 1944. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the Ardennes in a ghostly white. But the 101st Airborne Division, trapped in Bastogne, wasn't thinking about the weather. They were thinking about survival. Surrounded by German forces, low on food, ammunition, and medical supplies, the paratroopers had held out for days. The world watched. The enemy demanded surrender, but the Americans refused. And then, from the south, came the sound of engines. Thunderbolt VII led the charge. Abrams and the 37th Tank Battalion had fought through hell to get here, through Shermans, through enemy ambushes, through 6 direct hits. Now they were just miles from Bastogne. The final push was brutal. German anti-tank guns lined the road. Mines were buried beneath the snow. Snipers waited in the trees. But the 4th Armored Division pressed on. Thunderbolt VII took point, as always. Its gun roared, clearing the path. Infantry followed in its wake. The tank's tracks churned through snow and blood. At 4:50 p.m., the lead elements of the 37th Tank Battalion reached the outskirts of Bastogne. The siege was broken. Paratroopers emerged from foxholes, cheering. Some wept, others simply saluted. The relief had come not from the sky, but from the steel treads of Thunderbolt VII and the men who refused to quit. Abrams radioed back, "Task Force Abrams has reached Bastogne." It was a simple message, but it meant everything. The Battle of the Bulge would rage on for weeks, but the tide had turned, and Thunderbolt VII had become a symbol, not just of victory, but of resilience, grit, and brotherhood. For the crew, it was a moment they'd never forget. They had stared death in the face and driven through it, together. The guns eventually fell silent. Snow melted into spring. Europe was free. But the story of Thunderbolt VII didn't end with the war. It began a legacy. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams would go on to become Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army
and the namesake of the M1 Abrams tank, one of the most powerful armored vehicles in history. But he never forgot the Sherman that carried him through the Battle of the Bulge. Thunderbolt VII was preserved, not scrapped. It became a symbol of American resilience, displayed at museums and memorials. Veterans who served alongside it would visit, touch its hull, and remember the fire and frost of 1944. The tank's survival after 6 direct hits became a legend told in military academies, documentaries, and books. It wasn't just about armor. It was about the men inside, the leadership above, and the mission they refused to abandon. For the crew, life moved on. Some returned home to farms, factories, and families. Others stayed in the military. But they all carried the memory of Thunderbolt VII, the smell of cordite, the rumble of treads, the bond of brotherhood. In the decades that followed, the Sherman tank became a symbol of WW2. Thousands were built. Many were lost. But Thunderbolt VII stood out, not for being the biggest or the fastest, but for being the toughest. Its story reminds us that history isn't just dates and battles. It's courage, grit, and the will to keep going when everything says stop. Today, when visitors see Thunderbolt VII, they see more than steel. They see the spirit of a generation, the echo of a commander's voice, the fire of a gun that wouldn't quit. And they remember that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't firepower, it's heart.
In the grand tapestry of World War II, thousands of tanks rolled across Europe, but few earned a place in history like Thunderbolt VII. The M4 Sherman was the backbone of American armored forces. Over 49,000 were built. They fought in North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany. They weren't perfect. Many were outgunned by German armor, but they were reliable, fast, and easy to produce. Thunderbolt VII stood out not because it was unique in design, but because of what it endured. 6 direct hits, countless battles, and it kept fighting. Military historians often debate the effectiveness of the Sherman. Some say it was too lightly armored. Others argue its speed and numbers won the war. But Thunderbolt VII proved that with the right crew and leadership, even a standard tank could become legendary. Its story is taught in military academies as a case study in resilience, leadership, and battlefield innovation. Abrams' aggressive tactics, using speed and surprise, became doctrine. His refusal to retreat under fire became a model of courage. The tank's survival also helped shift public perception. It wasn't just a war machine, it was a symbol of American grit. Newspapers ran stories, veterans told tales, documentaries featured its journey. Today, Thunderbolt VII is more than steel and rivets. It's a reminder of what ordinary people can do in extraordinary circumstances. It's a monument to teamwork, sacrifice, and the will to endure. In museums, school books, and battlefield tours, its name lives on. And every time someone asks, what made Thunderbolt VII so special, the answer is simple. It never gave up. Thunderbolt VII wasn't just a tank, it was a testament. A testament to what happens when steel meets spirit, when leadership meets loyalty, when ordinary men face extraordinary odds and refuse to break. In the frozen forests of Belgium, under relentless fire, Thunderbolt VII kept moving. It took 6 direct hits and kept fighting. It led the charge that broke the siege of Bastogne. It carried a crew whose courage turned metal into legend. Today, its story echoes far beyond the battlefield. It lives in the hearts of veterans, in the pages of history, in the design of every tank that followed. It reminds us that resilience isn't just about armor, it's about attitude. That victory isn't just about firepower, it's about faith. And that heroes aren't born, they're forged in fire. Thunderbolt VII didn't win the war alone, but it showed us how to fight, how to endure, how to lead. And in a world that often forgets the cost of freedom, its story stands as a steel-clad reminder. Never underestimate the power of grit. So the next time you see a tank rolling across a battlefield, remember Thunderbolt VII. Remember the crew inside. Remember the commander who refused to retreat. Because sometimes the strongest weapon isn't the one with the biggest gun, it's the one that refuses to die.